Hey YouTube, today is Thursday, January the 30th, 2020, and my name is Chris. Welcome to my channel, by the way. This is City Prepping. On this channel, we discuss emergency preparedness. Obviously, the coronavirus is something that is concerning a lot of people from a pandemic perspective. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to express the concerns that I have about the current situation as the information is evolving on the coronavirus. There's a couple of things that came out today right before I sat down to film the video that is a new set of information that I feel is very concerning and I'd like to share with the community. And by the way, please don't mistake the word concerning for being an alarmist. I'm not at the position still at this point where I am in a panic mode or I think this is going to go into a full-blown pandemic that's going to kill everybody. By no means am I going to even present that position in this video. So if you feel that this video is just clickbait or an alarmist perspective, please note that I'm going to try to give what I feel is a balanced perspective. I'm going to list out concerns that I have at the moment, and at the end of the second half of the video, I'll express things that are what I find to be optimistic about this current situation and why I'm not in a position of, again, full-blown panic. And at the end of the video, I will share my perspective on where I stand as of today, again, as information is coming out. Now, I do, as you can see in frame, I do have protective gear that I have for myself and my family. I've got an adult's gas mask and a child's as well. I know these are overkill, but these are rated for CBRN, chemical, biological, radioactive, nuclear. You can buy filters that will filter out pretty much anything, especially at this level. I will post a link in the description section below and pin a comment if you're interested in pick up any of the gear that I personally have in my own inventory. And I will be buying more gear here over the next few weeks as supplies come out. And again, I think these are practical things I have on hand if you are in the emergency preparedness community. So let's go ahead and jump into the points. I'm going to go through these 7 points. And again, I hope that these are not misleading or an alarmist perspective. I'm going to do all I can to keep with the information that's available, avoiding any type of speculation. So let's go ahead and jump into the first one. The first one is the World Health, the World Health Organization, probably about 20 minutes before I sat down to write this content and prepare it, they declared a state of emergency, or a global health emergency, rather. Let me state that correctly. What does that mean? Well, essentially, they see this as a growing threat. When I did my initial video, I'll post a link in the cards up above. On Sunday, at that time, they had not declared this as an emergency, and it upset a lot of people, stating that they're downplaying this too much. And again, they have raised it to an actual global health emergency, which is it's a pretty substantial thing. You'll probably see the stock markets react negatively tomorrow from this, from this new, posting that they put out. But again, what does that mean? I posted this comment on my channel. A lot of people are asking, what does that mean? Essentially, a governing body of physicians around the world are seeing this as something more than what may or may not be just an epidemic at a national level in China. They're seeing this as a potential growing threat. So when I originally saw that, it did give me room for pause. Originally, I was very optimistic that this would probably kind of fizzle out. But again, the fact that they've escalated this, I think it's something you should research and understand why they did that. Let's go to the next point. Point number 2 is the first case of spreading actually occurred today in the United States from person to person. There was the first case, I believe, I'm probably going to butcher this, I believe it was in Chicago. I don't have well, actually I do have the article here in front of me. It's a married couple. The wife had come back from Wuhan and she actually transmitted that to her husband. So there actually is a first case where it was spread person to person, documented in the United States. Prior to today, as far as I know, there was no at least documented cases that we know of. So that is a new development and something that, again, concerns me. I think those are the first 2 things that I'm going to be following very closely. The third point that I'd like to make, and again, maybe I'm getting a little technical here. My background's in microbiology. I did my BA in microbiology at the University of Texas 20 years ago, believe it or not. This virus is an RNA-based virus, meaning that whenever it replicates itself in the host, whenever it gets in, takes over a cell, it will replicate using RNA, which is a very sloppy process. It lends itself to mutations, which can be bad for a virus. Well, good for the virus, bad for you and I, because it can mutate to the point that any advantage that is given during a mutation where it can actually begin to reproduce faster, it then is able to do that. It's able to find, kind of, so to speak, a path through mutation. And so whenever you look at things that replicate using RNA, that's problematic because, again, it's a sloppy process, whereas whenever we replicate our cells in our body. It's done through DNA. It's a much cleaner, not perfect, but a cleaner process. So that's something when again, based on what I study in college, it does concern me. And again, usually that type of reproduction goes in favor of the virus. Number four, the fourth point is that it's mostly contained in China at the moment. Now, I say mostly because the cases that are showing so far on the graphs, the things that I've been following, show that it's by and large contained in China. Now, why would that be a problem? Obviously, that's an upside, right? Well, the challenge is I just feel like that's one of those things that has a potential for it to hop. I'm not saying it will, or I'm not saying I have any kind of inside source that's saying, oh, I know it's going to hop over here in this country. But if it were to even, for example, and again, I know I'm speculating here, but I think a potential case that could happen is if it were to move into India or another country with a large population that may or may not have the infrastructure in place to quickly deal with it, could be very problematic if it were to grow there. So what we're seeing right now is, again, it's contained in China. But again, if it got across the border, it could be problematic. Now, this is a graph that I'll show here in this video that I looked at in my last video. Again, I'll post a link in the description section below. This shows, now we're actually up to 8,200 cases. Last Sunday, at the time I did a video, we were only at 2,000 cases. We're up to 171 confirmed deaths. Again, you have to remember confirmed. I have been reading a lot of articles, and one of the things they say is that even though that's confirmed, you have to realize this is coming out of China, and China is not usually open to giving out a lot of information, especially if it makes them look bad. One of the things that also concerns me is that China is taking this very seriously, and they've stated as such from their prime minister, mispronouncing his name, Xi. But whenever they've actually declared this as a big concern, obviously they're known for suppressing information. Whenever they say that something is a problem, it's something that probably you and I should be taking very seriously. Number five, the fifth reason I'm concerned is the incubation period is up to 5 weeks, or I'm sorry, up to 2 weeks rather. I think they said on average the incubation period is roughly 5 days, but there have been cases up to 2 weeks that they're seeing. Now, what does this mean? Essentially, from what I'm reading, this gives the virus the opportunity to spread during that 2-week period, person to person. That's problematic. Now, SARS, from again what I've studied and read, had a much faster spread rate and a higher mortality rate. Now, SARS, if you remember, I think I wish I had the numbers in front of me. If I remember correctly, it infected, about a little over 8,000 people, and you had, I think about 800 people die. It had, in other words, about I believe it was 8.9%, 9% roughly, 9.6 mortality rate. So far, the coronavirus is showing 2.2, give or take. So what does that mean? Essentially, during that incubation period, when the virus is, someone's a host is carrying it, they're ill, they may be coughing on people, they may be spreading it unbeknownst to them that they don't even know they're sick. During that time period, they're able to, spread it. Whereas SARS, something like that, the time frame when someone initially contracts to the time that, they know and they're, quarantined or whatever, it's a lot faster with SARS. So in addition, because SARS has a higher mortality rate, it's able to kill off the host faster, so it's not able to spread faster. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is this seems to be moving a little slower and has a lead time that can catch people off guard, not knowing that they're sick. That can be problematic because they may not catch it, before it spreads out. And again, that's why I'm holding my breath to see what plays out in the next 2 to 3 weeks, next month. Because as of today, as I stated in the previous point, it's mostly contained in China. But I just don't know, and this is where I feel like you don't see a lot of it in the news per se, because who knows if this has spread. And again, I don't want to go down the path of speculation, but personally, I think I'm just holding my breath to see how this plays out over the next few weeks and next few months if this does not, if we don't see the levels of illnesses go down in China. Okay, so having said that, again, the mortality rate is lower, but it's more contagious than SARS, and I pointed that out previously. It's very contagious. So point number 6 is that the information that comes out of China is not always accurate. And again, I stated that earlier. China has a history of suppressing information. If something makes them look bad, they don't want it to be seen. It's just, obviously, I can't sit here and honestly defend America having done or doing really much different, but I feel like China really makes it a point to not always include the information that they want people to know. So you have to kind of take that with a grain of salt, and that's the way I look at it. There are reports coming out that families have voiced their concerns and frustration that their relatives' cause of death was marked as severe pneumonia or viral pneumonia on their death certificates. That, again, may be a reason, may or may not, why we're seeing underreporting of actual, people dying. It just really comes down to how it was actually documented at the time of death. We don't know if what they're saying as a pneumonia was actually coronavirus. There is an article that I'll link to in the description section below, and I'll pull it up here. This one just came out today, again, while I was preparing the article from Vice News. You can now go to jail in China for criticizing Beijing's coronavirus response. So again, what I do appreciate is that we live in the day and age of social media. Information can spread quickly. But if the government stops people from doing that, then, and again, tying back to the main point, if they are controlling the information that's flowing out, you may or may not be getting the full story. And again, I know bringing this point up can make me sound like a conspiracy theorist. And again, that's not the point. The point is that it's just the reality. And again, that's a concern I have with China right now. And the last point is there's not a lot of what I would consider very strong information. And again, that ties into the previous point. These two are almost the same point. When you look at the numbers and you look at the mortality rate, it just comes down to how much information do we really have on this. And again, I feel like it's still at the beginning stages. Again, one of the first confirmed cases in Wuhan was in around December 30th and 31st. That's when things begin to that area started drawing attention. So I feel like it's hard to get an average or understand really what's fully going on, as we just are still at the beginning stages of this. So having laid those out, again, I don't want to sound like an alarmist, but these are things that I would consider as concerning. Do I feel like I've got to run for the hills yet? No, I do not. Am I taking drastic actions, going out and buying up everything I can at the store and preparing to stay in place for months on end? No, I'm not. I'll talk about that a little more at the end of the video. When would I actually do something like that? It would have to be a ways out before I go to that extreme. So on that note, let me balance with 5 reasons I feel that this is maybe not going to be such a big issue. 5 reasons I'm optimistic, I'll put it that way. Number 1 was a low mortality rate. 2.5% currently is what they're showing, 2.2, 2.5. Again, as I stated in a previous point, that can be good for the virus because it gives it longer and more time to spread, and it doesn't kill the host off, so it's able to continue to spread faster than something like SARS. So again, am I contradicting myself? No. From what I've read and seen, it seems like it's mostly the elderly or those that are immunocompromised that are susceptible to dying from this. It doesn't seem like it's just hammering the strong. And again, there's just not a lot of information that I'm seeing. So that's what we're being told at the moment. And when I say we're being told, is what I mean is what information is, for the most part, coming out of China. Second point, it's mostly contained to China. So that is good news. I feel like as long as they continue to quarantine that area and other countries do the same, hopefully, fingers crossed, this does not cross out and spread, again. I think my biggest fear at this point is, again, I mentioned this earlier, if it were to hop into into India. India, again, it's a developing nation and they don't have a lot of the protocols and equipment and the money in place to move on it quickly. The infrastructure is not there. So I think India could be ripe to see, potential problems if it were to hop there. And again, as far as I know, there hasn't been any major cases there. But again, that is when I see it move toward India and it grows there, that's, I think, where I'll become, I'll move up my DEFCON level, I'll put it that way. The third point is the U.S. medical community is not overly concerned. I know this is an anecdotal argument that I'm about to use, but I have several friends that are, one that's a physician, she's in the LA area. The other is a ICU nurse, one of my old roommates from college. He's down in Houston, and I've spoken to both of them, and I've spoken to other physicians. I've read articles that they've shared with me that are internal within the medical community, and none of them seem to be quite worried, to be honest. That's what I was kind of taken back by. They're like, well, okay, it's going to run its course, but it hasn't really gotten here to the United States. And as such, if it's not really spreading here, they're not concerned. Obviously, look at things like influenza, the annual flu. I mean, that kills tens of thousands of people annually. So they see that way more as a threat than the coronavirus. But again, I said this earlier, if we do see a rapid rise of reports of incidents, where people contracted in the United States, I think that's where I would move from their optimism to concern. The fourth point is that vaccines are being aggressively produced. There's a lot of technology that 10 years ago did not exist to be able to quickly replicate a vaccine that I was reading a lot of articles that a lot of these medical facilities around the United States are able to coordinate. They're able to use past sets of viruses to basically find where the mirror is, where there's a similar code base, and they're able to create the vaccines very quickly. So technology, fortunately, has advanced to the point where we can move faster. Does that mean that they can stay ahead of it? That was some of the concerns that the articles that I read voiced, is that a pathogen could mutate, it could take, could make a diversion, take a change, and they may not be able to stay in front of it. So I'm optimistic that they will. The last point is information has gotten better. What do I mean by that? Well, we live now in the day and age of social media. If a community, let's just say hypothetically, a city neighboring you, was impacted, I'm sure they're going to quarantine that area off. Maybe you'll see martial law implemented. I'd like to believe that it won't get to that point, but we're able to stay ahead of it faster than we did in the past. And again, not to contradict myself, but again, the one challenge and concern I have is that it does have a long incubation period. So potentially someone in the city could visit a neighboring city and they may not even know it had spread over to them. But again, I'm optimistic that that's not going to be the case. And again, I appreciate the fact that we have information. And for me personally, and I'll talk about this maybe more, I'm not going to hop ahead, but let me give you my final thoughts. Prior to sitting down and making this video, I've been thinking a lot about what I want to say and how I want to present it. Again, I don't want to come off as an alarmist, and that's not the intent. I do want to keep people informed and have people think about seriously the ramifications that if this does get out of control, it could be a problem. I had a long talk with the Canadian prepper a couple of nights ago on Skype. We talked about this at length. We're both optimistic at this point. I haven't talked to him today, so I know prior to coming onto this video 2 hours ago, I was optimistic, but when the World Health Organization came out with a report at noon, my time, I think my view changed a little. I was going to go into this video with about an 80%, how should I say, optimistic perspective that this is not going to go anywhere. I think I probably would move that number down to 65% optimistic now. And again, I'm not at a point where I'm going to take drastic actions, but I'm probably going to watch this a lot closer, especially here in the United States for obvious reasons. What are my next steps? Well, I'm going to watch this closely. I'm not going to take drastic actions. I'm not going to run to the store and load up on a bunch of food. I'm not going to buy a bunch of ammo. I'm not going to go out and do a bunch of stuff. I'm taking this as, hey, just keep a watch on it. I do want to be prepared. And I think, again, that's why I personally purchase gear, and I will continue to buy gear, because if this does escalate, I just don't want to be behind the curve and trying to catch up with it. I think if this truly does escalate, and I'll probably create a video on this, there are some certain protocols that I'll enact, making some certain decisions, staying in the house with my family, making sure we have the proper supplies needed to stay in place. If we have to make a run before, I would say we need to be concerned. But again, I just don't feel like we're at that place, not even really at this point even near that. So I'm not advocating running for the hills or taking drastic actions at this point. But again, everybody's got their threshold. Everybody's threshold is different. I know I have a lot of subscribers that want to take action now and again, stay ahead of it. So I think that may not be a bad idea if you have that opportunity or that you have that ability to do so. What am I going to do next? What am I going to talk about next on this channel? Well, I'll talk about what to do if it does escalate. I'm going to have a talk with the owner of the company that I use that I get my mask from. We're going to do a video together talking about different options and provide some educational information there. I do plan on, again, if this continues to escalate in the next few weeks, I'll probably be doing some more videos on building containment units, how to properly decontaminate yourself before coming to your house if you go out in the public. Just start, really looking at this and scrutinizing, providing more practical information that if you want it, it'll be available on the channel. So I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are. Again, I hope I gave a level-headed approach on this video. I just don't want it to come off as me sounding alarmed or feared, because I'm not. I know some of you are. And again, stay optimistic. I really don't think this is going to blow up at this time. And what I'll try to do is every 2 to 3 days release a video just giving you more information on what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. I don't have any kind of secret, inside information I wish I did that I could tell, like, oh, this is what I'm hearing from, down low, this is not on the news. I just don't have those kind of sources. I probably use a lot of the same information you do, but I'm just trying to look at this from a level-headed perspective. If you have any questions, comments, post those in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, click on the like button, and as always, share on social media. And again, if you're interested in any of the gear, I'll post links to it in the description section and pin in the comments below. As always, stay safe out there.